Okay. How's it going over there? Are we ready to start? Phil, are we ready to start? Phil's giving us the thumbs up. Oh, I can hear myself coming through over there. Hello. Are there more of us up here than you down there? I think there are. Not quite. I've done gigs like that before. It's fine.
It's character building.
It's character building, exactly.
It's a good crowd.
And we're going to be talking about building audiences, aren't we? So that's absolutely perfect.
We're the experts.
Okay, he's going to look at it as an action research sort of encounter group about building audiences with a very small audience.
I reckon there are going to be more by the end. So that's building.
Yeah, everyone, we always say that. That's that's leadership, isn't it?
The legacy of this as well.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah.
That's it. We are streaming this event, so obviously to the millions of people out there who are listening now, I'm waving. This is the sound of my wave. Oh, it's video as well, isn't it? You can see my wave. Great. Can I ask you to come a bit closer? You don't have to. Is that okay? I'm going to try and involve you in this a bit, seeing as you've actually come all this way on Sunday morning, and you're missing the archers as well, which Julia pointed out to me, and pointed out to the archers over Twitter. So, yeah, it'd be good if you could sort of interject, but you do need to speak on mic, otherwise the millions of people out there in sort of digital cyberspace won't be able to hear what you're saying, and they'll only have half of the conversation, which would be a shame. Okay. So let's do the admin things. Thank you very much to South Bank Centre, to Gillian Moore and the New Music Biennial for hosting us here. My name is Richard Whitelaw. I'm the head of programmes at Sound of Music, and we are based at Somerset House, just over the road. I didn't come from there this morning, which is a bit of a shame, actually, because if I actually lived in the office, I could have had an extra 45 minutes in bed, but never mind. And we do this series of panel discussions called Sounding Out. We do two or three of these a year, and they're sort of expert advice and discussion sessions around areas of professional practice in new music. They can be sort of technically focused, or artistically focused, or indeed in this one, sort of audience focused. And this is an iteration in that series. So I know the panel, and I've already spoken to them, so I know they have lots of interesting things to say, which is helpful and good for you as well, since you've made the effort to turn up at this time. So what I think I'll do is just introduce everybody, and then we're going to go straight into questions. And then I've got Q&A with the audience, 20 minutes, but maybe I'm going to sort of fold you in a bit earlier than that. If anyone's got anything they're dying to say, please do put your hand up, and we'll get there. Is there a roving mic? Do we have one?
There should be one at the desk.
Is there a roving mic? Oh, there is. Oh, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so you don't have to talk, you don't have to come on stage. It's fine. So, and we finish at 11:20. So I apologise for starting a few minutes late. I hope we don't mind. So on my left is Lisa Meyer. Lisa is founder and director of the wonderful Capsule. Capsule is one of the UK's most inventive arts organisations. It existed for 15 years now. Capsule crafts extraordinary cultural events for adventurous audiences, and a very innovative arts producer, initiating, commissioning and producing multidisciplinary work, including festivals, events, artist development and partnerships with a range of organisations. Recent projects have included producing the 4-month opening season of Birmingham Central Library. Birmingham Central Library is the largest public library in Europe, I believe. The project employed 469 artists, attracting an audience of 1.2 million, which is slightly different from the audience today, isn't it? So very good. I can't imagine that kind of number going to an event. That's very impressive. As well as creating and producing their own projects, including the groundbreaking heritage project Home of Metal. Home of Metal was delivered across 15 venues and shortlisted for National Lottery Heritage Awards. Capsule's legendary, that's my word, not in the press release, Supersonic Festival is indeed one of the leading UK experimental music festivals, and it's now in its 11th year, and it continues to draw audiences, performers and industry from Birmingham and all across the world. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Shaun is a lovely man, and he's been exploring the art of...
Next.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it says here. Shaun has been exploring the art of streaming and online engagement for around 10 years now. He ran Earth Monkey Productions, which was one of the earliest net labels for sort of improvised music, experimental music. And that ran from 2006 to 2009. Earth Monkey retired with over 500,000 downloads, so another big number there. Shaun is currently working with Hugs Bison, and Phil from Hugs Bison is the charming gentleman over there who's involved in the streaming. More on that later. Hugs Bison is researching in partnership with Sound and Music best practice for streaming and engaging audiences with cheap, sort of off-the-shelf technology, and really pushing the technology as far as it can do. Harry and I could give you a breakdown of some of the quotes that we received for streaming this event, but I won't go into it. But let's just say that Shaun's was the most attractive in terms of it being sort of, you know, off the shelf, rough and ready, and just very sort of can-do attitude in terms of price and cheap. Yes. Cheap technology. It said that. These are your words, not mine. And Shaun's very busy doing all sorts of this stuff at the moment. It includes streaming the Sounding Out digital talks, which is one of these today. And then you're nipping up to Newcastle to stream 13 hours of Tusk Mini, aren't you? Great, so I'll get a chance to experience that. Hugs Bison use touchscreen technology and have been doing a series of off-grid gigs for 3G over the last couple of years. Is that right, Shaun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Good. Well, more on that later. We're going to explore what exactly that means and how this whole setup works a bit later on. Shaun is on this year's Sound and Music's New Voices cohort, and New Voices sort of showcases the most exciting emerging composers and improvisers in the UK, and Shaun is amongst that celebrated group of individuals. And this is for Shaun's work with technology and free improv particularly. His latest composition project is called Some Unicorn, and it's an online collaboration with over 50 musicians from all over the world. So I'm sure you can tell us a bit more about that later on as well. Who's down? Oh, is that Julia? Sorry, Julia.
I can't see you.
Yeah, I know. That's just have to listen. Julia
it's
is
being streamed.
It's being streamed, exactly. Julia is director of the Hub, and Julia has been working for 20 plus years promoting, marketing and fundraising for independent, beyond mainstream music. Julia earned her stripes working in a, composers note the poor page turn there, number of venues, including London's Barbican Centre, where you were development director at a music charity, and then as artist manager and producer. After a spell as music officer at Arts Council England, in 2002 she co-founded the Hub. The Hub is essentially a social enterprise. The Hub part subsidises its in-house music projects through consultancy, training and research work. Julia is leading the Hub's new Joining the Dots project, which you can find out about from the literature which Julia has kindly distributed to the seats. And Joining the Dots explores, dear me. Joining the Dots.
Sunday morning.
It's Sunday. I need a drink, but that sounds terrible. I need water. Join the Dots project, which will explore and does explore potentially game-changing ideas for independent music sector, and to provide new opportunities for those in the sector to meet, collaborate, and share knowledge with each other. Clients and partners Julia has worked with at the Hub include AIM, BBC Talent, the Musicians Union, PRS for Music Foundation, and the Arts Council England, as well as hundreds of individual artists and small businesses working in the indie sector. Julia is on the board of National Youth Jazz Collective, an advisor for PRS for Music Foundation, and company mentor for Chimera Productions and Penned in the Margins. All these were the wrong way round on my bit of paper. You've all disrupted it. Martin. Hi, Martin. Martin is a creative media producer, digital consultant, arts events programmer, artist, and cultural broadcaster. He launched the Digital Media Centre at Southill Park in Berkshire in 2006, and is also program manager of the funded live stream project SPHlive.tv. He's digital coordinator at contemporary dance venue The Place, London, and is a founding committee member of the monthly business networking group Berkshire Digital. As an artist, he is known as a former leader of Ambient Trio 2. Did I say that right?
You did, yeah. Very good.
and for his Sonic Arts performance projects, which have toured internationally. Great. Oh, a few more people have turned up while my head was down. That's fantastic. Hello, welcome. Martin, my first question is to you. And when we were chatting on the phone the other day, we were talking about this sort of digital landscape for art as being a sort of very much a gold rush or Wild West phase, if you like. And I'm not trying to assert my IP over that particular piece of spin, but I wanted to. We both felt appropriate to both of us at the time. We had quite an animated conversation about it. I wanted to sort of go back to that place a bit, really, and just thinking about what the landscape looks like at the moment and what the opportunities are. Where are the wild animals and this sort of thing? Because I think you probably have as good a perspective on that as anyone. So what does it look like now?
I think that sort of the frame of the Wild West is really interesting and exciting because there are so many things that are evolving quickly. I think the lack of precise definition of these new formats means there's opportunity there. There's opportunity for something new and creative to emerge. So from my point of view, the way I sort of think about what's happening is in terms of audience experiences. And I think that there are broadly three different formats that are sort of coming out now. One of which is the model of companies like Glyndebourne, who are streaming their opera productions into cinemas. So they're using a sort of pre-existing audience experience and just delivering some new content, and that's certainly being well received by audiences. And the Picture House chain seem to have been really sort of leading the development of this across their network. The other way of experiencing live performance online at the moment is just the kind of in your home. So it's literally just representing that stage performance and delivering it right onto your computer screen at home. And I think that's the one that probably will change the most rapidly, as we go on, which then leads to that sort of Wild West territory of what kind of falls into the transmedia area where you've got performances that are happening across different platforms, and the live stream delivery is just part of that. But you may also be experiencing it on websites and Twitter and Facebook and interacting with the drama or the other elements of the story. And I think at the moment that there's a lot of potential gold in those hills of the sort of transmedia cross-platform experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Music is just obviously part of this stuff that's happening, but it seems to me that many of the most interesting, well, from our discussion, things that I've learned over the last few days, some of the more interesting things are in sort of more fiction-based areas of activity, such as theatre, and drama, radio drama and things like that. What kind of examples can you? I'm just thinking about how sort of music can sort of think about the way that it works in this area. What can be learnt from some of the other stuff that's going on, and using all these different platforms and linking them together? Yeah,
I think it's narrative, which is the ingredient of something that's a bit more dramatic that can be exploited, because you can structure things that allow audiences to explore them under their own steam and as much or as little as they want. So there's a sort of, I think it's devising experiences which have a freedom in them that won't compromise the work itself, but does allow a sort of a deeper experience if that's what people are motivated to do.
Mm-hmm. And what are good examples out there at the moment?
Let's have a think. This is obviously when one's mind goes blank.
Yeah.
I think things like, well, one of my favourite experiences and examples is Secret Cinema, who've developed an amazing production where you buy a ticket and you know at the end of the experience you'll see a film. However, you don't know what that film is. But the experience is so impressive, lots of people do buy them. And as soon as you buy your ticket, that's when your experience starts. And because they draw out themes from the movies that they're going to screen ultimately, they've got this sort of rich amount of material to play with, and they might send you advice on the uniform that you have to wear to attend the event, or the last one that I went to was a screening of the film Brazil. So you were cast as an employee in this sort of very kind of corporate, insane company. And you had to engage with your fellow audience members in advance of going to the event, and sort of friend them in a kind of micro social network. And you're encouraged to do that because the more people you friended, you'd have a higher rank when you arrived at the event. Which actually was a little bit spurious, but people really went for this, and so you had an audience who were already speaking to each other, and already speaking about the kind of experience that they thought they were going to have, weeks and weeks before they got to the live, the live event. And so, anyone who's been to Secret Cinema, that you spend 3 hours walking through a large space, just absorbing an atmosphere. That's drawn out of the film before you actually get to see it. So suddenly it has this whole sort of wraparound experience with very busy social media platforms around that. Facebook and Twitter are absolutely alive with community, and I think that's probably something that they're super successful about is developing this kind of community of experience around the live event. The other things that we perhaps mentioned, I don't know if you're going to talk about the Doctor Who and TV stories later.
They're on my list, but you can have those
later on. Okay, we can always come back to them because they're lots of fun. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, but it's wonderful that the BBC have really kind of absorbed a lot of these possibilities and are absolutely off and running with them and doing cross-platform stuff that complements their TV series. So Sherlock is a great example. In the TV show, John Watson has a blog which he writes. That's his kind of contemporary diary in there, and that blog really exists. You can go to the johnwatsonblog.com and read that. And when the series is on, that actually comes alive with content which tangentially sort of complements the show. So yeah, it's the sort of same idea of like this extending the focused delivery into this sort of wraparound idea.
Yeah. So giving some examples of how then the audience experience is enhanced, and maybe even sort of fan culture starts to seep into that and take over it a bit. And you gave the example of Sherlock, which was a brilliant example, and the only one I could think of was The Archers again, and it was Helen's Fetus having a Twitter account, I think, was in terms of fan culture, and Helen's Fetus obviously wasn't a character because it was a fetus, but it had a Twitter account. Someone had actually created one and started using it.
Or the Doctor Who, the
Daleks we spoke about as well,
Dalek
Sec and Dalek Tay talking to each other and having these sort of philosophical debates on Twitter about Dalek culture. Because one of them was half human and one of them was pure Dalek. I think Dalek Sec is half human, isn't he?
Yeah.
Tragic character in many ways because of that. But then that was played out on Twitter as a sort of fan thing as well, which is kind of related to that as well, I think. Julia. So we've spoken a bit about some of these examples of practice and expanding events through use of digital technology. But in terms of the Joining the Dots program, because it became clear to me that in shortlisting for Joining the Dots, it became a really interesting sort of litmus test of thinking around digital at the moment for you, and where this thinking might be stuck at the moment, and where there's possibility for these to sort of leap forward and where there to be a sort of paradigm shift. So I wanted to invite you to talk about what the digital ambitions for the programme are, and then what insight that it might have given to you particularly around this area of work and what the opportunities are.
Yeah, I should say that the fetus is now called Henry.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if Henry has a blog or a Twitter account, but maybe we can find out. So Joining the Dots, what was quite interesting, we had, so Joining the Dots had, we invited ideas to come in, focused on 3 themes. One was about new financial models for independent music, and then the theme that we got the most applications for was for projects that were exploring how you could use content and technology to drive up live attendance. So instead of getting stuck on that, how do you monetize the content thing, which people just tie themselves up in knots about, forgetting that, but thinking about how you could use technology to drive up money and attendance in the live sector, which is the bit of the music industry at the moment seems to be the most buoyant. What emerged when we sort of thought through and reflected on the application process was that we had just under 160 applications, and the ones that came in from the music sector, by and large, the most, there's probably a siren going to go off now because I'm going to say the disruptive word, which is just like, you know, buzzword bingo time, isn't it? But the most disruptive ideas, it felt that all that people could get to was this idea of live streaming. And we saw loads of applications for live streaming, and quite a lot of people saying we're going to stream our folk gigs or our jazz gigs, and these are going to get thousands of audiences online. And you just think, well, there's something wrong in the mathematics there, because it just doesn't feel like you know quite how you're going to do that. So what became really clear was that we'd got very exciting ideas from lots of people in the tech world, and but those weren't very contextualized, and they didn't really know how they would make them work in the music world. And then we had some ideas from music people who were clearly trying to kind of get their heads around it, but couldn't quite get there. So what we've decided to do, because the project is all about testing new ideas, and the project itself is a bit of an experiment for us, is to divert some of the money away from those projects and put together what we're in shorthand calling a hack day, where we can get people with various skills from the tech world and people with various skills and experience from the music world to come together and try and solve those problems together. Because it seems to us that there's a massive gap at the moment between those worlds, and everyone really is a music fan. So every technologist that I've met over the last few months since we've been doing this project has got music kind of beating in their heart. And so it just seems to be if you could put those two sets of people together, we could achieve something amazing. So that's what we're really trying to do, I suppose, with the next phase of the project. The other thing that we're looking to do, Joining the Dots has two areas of focus. One is development of new ideas. The second one is about finding new ways that we can share knowledge. And obviously, with everything that's possible now using digital technology, it feels to me like we should all be a lot cleverer, because it's much easier for us to share what we know. But for some reason, that's not happening, or it doesn't seem to be happening as much as it could be. So we have made this fairly grand statement about trying to foster a sense of a community of the curious and the generous, where people routinely share what they know. I know something that you don't know, you know something that I don't know, but let's try and share that. So we're trying to test out lots of different ways that we can harness people's knowledge and try and create, I think when I was talking to you, Richard, I called it like a big brain. I'm going to try and create a big online brain so that we can all become a bit smarter. Now, Joining the Dots is a research project. We've got no idea how we're going to do it. We obviously can't do it on our own. What we can do is kind of, I suppose, tap into some of the wiring, the neurons that already exist online, and try and create some new neurons. I don't know if that's right biologically or neuroscientifically, but to create sort of new ways of connecting people. That's, I guess, what we're trying to do as well.
I think you described it as a giant digital super brain.
I was obviously more ambitious.
It wasn't Sunday. It wasn't Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
And we'd already spoken for about half an hour, so and probably had more coffee. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Shaun. I wanted to, as an artist, I wanted to ask you some questions about your practice, because I think that it's really interesting how this sort of idea of guerrilla streaming has started to affect your artistic practice. But first of all, I just, for the benefit of everyone, wanted you to sort of describe give us, practically in terms of guerrilla streaming, what's involved with the streaming that's happening here today, and how easy is it for someone else to actually just do that?
Well, it's really easy. We're really lucky. Hugs Bison is two of us, me and Phil. And our tagline is, I'm a musician with an interest in technology, and Phil is a technologist with an interest in music. So we do overlap really well on that side of things. And we've both got a history of very strong DIY ethic of, that's how you do it with really expensive technology. A good example is I do a lot of kids' workshops with technology, and I worked for the BBC, and their animation workshops used to be on the most expensive MacBooks, £200 software, £6,500 cameras. And I come from a place called Barrow, which is fairly poor, and I'm, the kids I work with ain't going to afford that. So I developed a system that was a webcam, free open source software, which would run on pretty much any computer. So I reduced it from £7,000 to 15 quid or so. And this is why I sounded music like us. Because it's about what is the real definition of what you're trying to do, which today we're streaming. We've got a multi-camera setup, which is basically two webcams. We've gone up market, we've got them for the £25 HD webcams, Logitech ones, from Tesco's, Asda, online, your local independent retailer. And Phil's running a couple of fancy, is it all open source stuff you're using, Phil? Yeah, it's mostly free, open source. If you're interested, we can let you have the names of those. We'll also be doing a blog for Sound and Music about the technology we've been using and discovering. But the guerrilla streaming thing, the big thing, because you need quite a lot of bandwidth to do visual stuff, so you need to be plugged in. But the big thing we're really excited about as artists is using 3G signal to do audio streaming. And we've been doing this, we've got a little off-grid system, because we both play iPads, going into a battery-operated mixing desk, through an iRig little converter, and then into a mobile phone. And it's an app called Mixler we've been using. There is a free version, and you can be broadcasting in 2 minutes. So that's, if you've got any sort of music making kit, and you can get sound into a computer, you can be streaming for free, which is great. So we got that, then we were just like, we did what you guys were saying about we did a gig in a venue, we streamed that, but then we were like, actually, we could go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So what we've been doing is just going to interesting places. We did a little day's tour in Cumbria, and we started on our local common, and just sat in the middle of a field playing, streaming over 3G. Then we went to a wind farm, we went to a park, and we went to the beach. So just a bit of just play a gig with a possible audience of however many. Realistically, audiences can tend to be quite small if you've not got the marketing budget. But we were just sat on the beach with the tide coming in and just playing with headphones on, and it's artistically, it's just such a great freeing feeling. So we've got, it's a small bag, and that's our entire kit. And the other thing we've been looking at is collaborating online with people from some unicorn album that I'm putting together. I've just sent out a load of sort of sketches that people are playing over the top, and I'm putting it together. So that's just me looking at group composition. But then there's the playing at the same time as people, which is kind of hard, because the further you are away from people, the bigger the lag is. Everyone understands the concept of lag. If I talk to someone in New York, it takes half a second for them to hear me, and then if it comes back, that's another half a second. So to play it as a band is next to impossible. There's some apps that quantize and do lots of fancy stuff. I've been talking with a group called Graphic Ships that are New York, Marseille, Sheffield and Manchester, and we're going to be playing with them. And they've been looking at what they're calling the aesthetics of lag, and using the lag and using the dropouts you get on transatlantic phone calls. So it's, I think that comes back to the Wild West theme as well. Of you kind of, I've been explaining it a bit like when electric guitars were invented, people were trying to play them as a sort of amplified acoustic guitars. Then they started going, well, actually, that distortion that shouldn't be there is actually quite nice. So you start playing around with the edges of the technology, and that's when the interesting stuff really happens, and that's what is exciting about the moment of the streaming stuff, but also the technology of things like iPads. I think that's about me.
Great. Okay, thank you. So we've spoken about, you know, the impact this can have on artists, and thank you for that, Shaun. I really like that sort of aesthetics of lag idea, and this idea of using noise and the failure sort of inherent within the system in a creative way, rather than seeing that as an obstacle, seeing that as an opportunity for creative work, which I think is one of the most interesting ways that artists actually interact with technology at all, really. But Lisa, just to bring it back to sort of, you know, audiences, Capsule and Supersonic actually have always struck me as, Capsule particularly always struck me as an organisation that knows its audience pretty well, is very close to its audience, and talks to its audience really directly using digital platforms. What do you know about them?
Well, I think that they're very sort of tech savvy, and so quite a lot of them are on Twitter and on Facebook, and so they're already using social media. And I guess the only difference really is, rather than handing them a flyer at the end of a gig and saying thanks very much for coming along, we're kind of continuing that conversation afterwards and before the show as well. So when we're putting the lineup together for Supersonic, for instance, we'll put up a few months before who are the sorts of artists you want to see. And while we're not asking them to program it or curate it, we're inviting a conversation about the sorts of things that people are excited about at that moment. And then we ask them for their feedback, you know, what parts did they like, what didn't they? And again, it's not that we are completely led by them, but they help to shape our future events in that sort of sense. So I think that they help us to create a buzz around artists as well, because I suppose in a way you would call them tastemakers, that the people that come to Supersonic and they see an artist perform there, while it might be a relatively small audience, you know, 800 to 1,500 people, but for this sort of music, to then go out and kind of use social media to sort of spread the word. So quite often people talk about COPE, which is create once and post everywhere, but our audience do that for us. So we create good content, good quality content by filming the sets, and then it's our audience that kind of put it out there for us. So they sort of help to promote and market not only us, but also the artists that we work with.
It's interesting you say good quality, because I think that's central to all of this as well. And obviously there's, you know, all sorts of artists that come to Supersonic, and maybe it's the first time they've played in the UK. And I'm thinking of, you know, their sort of profile. And if you're investing that energy into getting a really good recording and really good materials that are then online, have you found then that that's actually helped them in terms of the legacy for those artists as they've moved on?
So I can take like Sleaford Mods, for example, who I guess the other thing about Supersonic is that where it came from is that we used to more so, but we put on a year-round programme, and quite often, even in a place like Birmingham, second largest city, you still have a relatively small audience. So we started to think about that niche in a sort of broader sense of the 10 people from Leicester, the 15 from Nottingham, the 10 from Glasgow, etc. And I think it works in a similar way. And so a lot of the artists that play might play to a small audience in a pub upstairs, you know, a small venue, but actually what you're doing when you're bringing them to Supersonic is you're extending that. And I think it's, you know, so an artist like Sleaford Mods, they played last year, we recorded some of their set, and then, you know, looking back on it, like, I think it's like 8 months later, and they've had 16,000 views. And so it's kind of, it's helping to kind of broaden that sort of fan base.
And in terms of your marketing specifically, you've taken the step which, I mean, not unique in doing this, but it seems like quite a bold step really to sort of embrace digital marketing. Is all your marketing entirely digital now?
Pretty much, because I I think that you know a lot more about your audience. So dare I say, even something like Facebook, you can target your audience. So rather than just trying to put stuff out there and just hope for the best, you can, you know, if you've got a really limited budget, you've got to be really smart about how you use that budget. It's coming back to the sort of DIY. We've always been based on that. So how do you get the most for your buck, really? And I guess taking out Facebook adverts and linking up with you know, online magazines like Fact or The Quietist and having them in as media sponsors, you just have a lot more control about where that advert's being seen and who's looking at it, what it's being associated with. So you're already kind of building that audience and knowing a little bit more about them.
So the thought behind this is important, rather than just saturation. It's thought then action, rather than
yeah, and I guess with
there.
something like Facebook, you're trying to bring them back into becoming part of a group, so you've got a longer term relationship with them. So, you know, you're making that money that you're investing in that advert do more than just sort of advertise an event, but you're trying to build that community further.
Great, thank you. How might we grow this digital audience then? Does anyone have would anyone like to? Everyone's, you see how it works. Everyone takes a turn to speak, and then I open a question to them. But actually, do you have anybody? Hello.
Can I just come? Can I pick up on something that Lisa said though?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that people now think about targeting audiences being simpler because of Facebook and Twitter, when actually, you know, when I first started working in venues in the 90s, smart people were making their databases work for them. And what we're really talking about is audience data and understanding how to use it. And I think if you talk to a lot of marketing people now, even now they would say to you, don't forget the power of email, which I know is not very cool. But actually, the effort required and the commitment, I think, to sign up to an email list, I think if you're thinking about value, is different to liking something on Facebook or following somebody on Twitter. I think there's something about that commitment, and email is still a really valuable way of doing it. And I think in terms of conversion into actual ticket sales, I think if you speak to a lot of venues and a lot of promoters, they would say that email probably in terms of conversion is the one that has the highest rate. I don't know if that's the same for you, Lisa, but...
Well, I suppose, you know, what we do is when we're selling out e-tickets, we're getting that mailing list,
Yeah.
so they become part of that
Yeah.
email mailing list. But in the first instance, you're kind of looking at the sort of, I guess, the 3 degrees of separation of what's like us in a similar way. How can we target that audience? How can we bring them in?
Yeah.
Because we never wanted it to be, you know, this totally esoteric thing. Actually, it's about broadening out those sort of audiences. So.
But Julie, you've made flyers, and that's evidence by the
Yeah.
fact that they're here today. So what's
Yeah.
the thinking there? The reason that you have the hard copy as well as doing the digital stuff?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's you know, if you're chatting to someone, then it's good to give them something to go away to remind them to then check out stuff online. I think it's, you know, it was ever thus that you would have, you know, a mix of things in your toolkit, if you like. And I suppose picking up on what Lisa said, we've just got a bigger toolkit now than we used to have. You know, it used to be email was the only way that you could directly reach somebody, and obviously there are loads of ways that you can do that now. So we're sort of blessed as marketers in terms of the avenues that we can go into. But I still think that, you know, exit leafleting and stuff like that can be just as valid. It kind of depends on which audience you're going for and what your goals are, I suppose.
Great, thank you. I want to go back to the work for a bit as well. And Martin, you touched on this earlier, this idea of artworks that really inhabit this digital space rather than just using traditional formats such as sort of broadcasting things out, but actually, you know, use this platform in a really interesting way. And Lisa, you spoke about some interesting examples to me on the phone about from your own program of digital works that you've commissioned around for Supersonic. Can you tell us a bit about them and how they've actually worked, how the audience have interacted with those?
Well, they were more for the Library of Birmingham.
Yeah.
So that was in relationship to the collections that the library had, and it was about taking those things out of the archive and sharing them with the wider audience. So there's a book called The Birds of America, which is the James Audubon book, and it's one of the most expensive books in the world. I think it's like worth £1.2 million, and of course that stays in in a dark, dingy archive, and it's really difficult for, although it's owned by the people of Birmingham, it's very difficult for them to actually come and see it because they'd have to make an appointment. And so it was about giving access to that work. But rather than kind of, I suppose, making a Monty Python-esque type of piece of work from it, we asked an artist called Matt Watkins to use the content because it had been digitised, and to sort of bring it alive in some way. And so he took it as a starting point and then made a new piece of work. And I suppose it's allowing people to know that that work exists, you know, and that if they wanted to, then they can go and make that appointment. So it's just kind of trying to give access to those archives.
Mm. So an idea around sort of animating archives.
Yeah, I think about bringing, you know, traditionally, my experience of working with the library is that traditionally archives are about keeping them safe and keeping them in dark spaces and not necessarily sharing them with audiences. Mm-hmm. So this idea of still kind of protecting them, but actually sharing them, I think digital media allows you to, for more people to have access to them.
There was I don't know if anybody saw the Matthew Herbert or heard the Matthew Herbert piece last night, the 20 pianos, but there's a really similar thing. He recorded the most expensive piano, which is the piano that John Lennon wrote Imagine on, and it's now kept in a Perspex box and you can't play it, and you security guards and all that sort of thing. And he recorded the sound of it, and because nobody's allowed to play it, it sounds awful. It's like, I think he said something like 3 keys worked on the whole keyboard, and so he made a sound piece out of that. But that's another sort of example of sort of reappropriating something.
I mean, if we could get sidetracked into archives and have a fascinating conversation about archives. I was reflecting now, and Harry, there's Harry who works at Sound of Music. Hello. With our view on this, because she works on this thing called the British Music Collection that we look after, and our thinking right now is in this space that you identified as well, of that old focus on archives as well. What do you actually collect, and what your admissions policy and all that stuff. But actually, it's like, okay, but then we've actually got to shift to who is the audience and how we communicate with them, and for that to be the entire focus of it, really. So it's not just something which is locked away, but something that becomes sort of active. And then how do we do that? It's got to be a digital solution to that, really.
One of the things I've done in the past is I did a project called Cumbria Remixed, which was oral history recordings of people talking about Cumbria, field recordings of Cumbria, and we did a big remix project. I made it all into sort of stem packs and VJ packs that you could download, and then we did like a compilation album of all these different remixes of Cumbria, and that worked really well. It was great getting, certainly at an artist level, getting artists involved in collaborative work. I think we had about 40 sort of remixes sent in, and it was just great to record my local park and getting a remix from Salem. It was one of my favourite places I've ever got a remix back from. And then I think we had Roswell as well on that project. And just talking to people from Italy, and so. But I think because we're based in Cumbria, we're quite isolated, sort of traditionally. And if you know Cumbria, we live in Barrow, which is, Mike Hardy said it's the longest cul-de-sac in the world. It's 26 miles off the motorway to get there. So that online collaboration, which is organising an American tour just through MySpace, which I did in 2007, through to this just sharing of files, sharing thoughts, ideas, just going, we just did this, anyone got any ideas? And generating open conversation, which I think is the important thing. And the audience can come in, there's some Unicorn album, it's got some really, I've got Nico's drummer playing on it, I've got, who's also in Perubu, we've got sort of Stephen Grew, who's world famous improvising piano player, but then we've got people that wouldn't consider themselves musicians, but they quite fancy getting involved, and everyone's on a level playing field, talking to each other, and that's a big thing. It's about building communities, using the digital thing.
That sort of artist development agenda is something really strong within the live stream programme that I run at Southhill Park. We've just awarded 3 commissions to artists to create new work which is designed right from the outset to exist in a live space and an online space. We've got 3 very interesting projects that are sort of testing out different questions there. So one of them, for instance, is an artist who actually has a visual art background, Katerina Golubiowska. She has a project which is sort of exploring the ideas about space travel and time. So it's also got a kind of really nice DIY aesthetic to it. So she's decided she's going to make her own DIY Martian space capsule and perform within it. And then audiences will be able to encounter her performance online and in a real space. And she'll partly be demonstrating that idea of time delay, but with the idea that you're on your way to Mars, so it might be a little while before you get a reply to your tweet, with that sort of thing. But it'll illustrate some interesting stuff. We've got another project which is also taking that collaborative idea and having performers in different locations and sort of seeing the effect of that, that sort of basis. This coming week, actually, we couldn't fund as many projects as we wanted to on this programme, so I wanted to make more input available to artists. So this week we've got an ideas lab happening there called the Upstream Lab, where people can actually explore sort of three different areas, which is what can you do to develop a live experience for an online audience. Then what can you do to bring interactivity into a performance space from that audience? And then the third element is more technical. What kind of kit can you play with to achieve those sorts of things? So I think that area of play really is very fruitful at the moment, of letting artists have these opportunities to try ideas.
Sorry, can I just pick up on that? One of the things that we're looking to do is work with a number of venues around the country on some of the things that Martin's just been talking about. But the commissions that we're looking to do are going to take that, they're going to have as a starting point both the desire to kind of use technology to build the audience, but also do exactly what you talked about creating work which is created in order to exist online rather than it just being a broadcast of something that you've done on stage. And the area that we are really interested to explore is how technology can be used to build family audiences and children, younger audiences, because anyone that's got children or friends with children will know that from the age of about 2, every child now can do this and this. They're just all over their parents' tablets and their phones. And so the ideas that we've been thinking around, which aren't that well developed at the moment, but ideas around how you can bring elements of gaming and that kind of interaction and that relationship that people build with gaming, and link that into a venue. So in old money, it would have been like a kind of loyalty scheme where you do certain things and then you redeem your voucher at the box office and you get some. So I think there's we're talking about Wild West. I've got no idea what that will look like, but that's the challenge that we're putting out to artists.
Yeah, I've seen some really good examples with Minecraft, sort of museums and building. We had an artist that worked at I work at a 18th century corn mill that's fully working. But we had an artist came in and they designed, we had a group of kids, they built the mill in Minecraft. So we were also there people can walk around the mill and things like that. It's just I think artists can bring completely out of the box thinking to these problems because you're not looking at the technology, I think me and Phil have the conversation, most of the technology we use, we try and break, and we very quickly get to what it's supposed to do, then go, what does it really do? And that's where the interest lies, I think. I think it's artists and organisations working together on such things. So it's great that these hubs and giant brains are forming, because I think the only way forward is to be open about stuff. I think the days of keeping it to yourself is gone, or should be, anyway.
I wonder what you think of this, you and everybody. I like this idea of to use a sort of technological term, amplification, if you like, really. That a lot of the things that we've heard or we're talking about are really just amplification of the way that ideas around technology have always been. And I'm thinking about, Shaun, the way you were describing this model of communication with artists and how you build networks, which reminded me very much of the sort of fanzine culture, tape swapping, and writing letters, which it used to be when I wanted to get a bootleg copy of Napalm Death Live. I would send someone in the 80s, write them a letter and say, I've got the first Gong album on cassette, can you swap with me? And then the fanzine would come back as well with a load of other bands in it, and that would get you going, which just seems, it's the same thing, but just speeded up a million times. And I had some other ideas. Yeah, TV was interactive when I was a kid as well, but it was called Swap Shop with Noel Edmonds, and you could phone up, and if you remember that you could swap a Broken Action Man for a bag of Lego, and that is interactivity. There wasn't a bloody button on the programme, but, you know, people now still tell me, oh, I was on Swap Shop, I phoned up, and I did manage to swap these things, which is the same sort of idea, isn't it, really? It's like it became sort of audience-generated content, in a way, really, which is similar to some of those things. And because I like Panto, I wanted to go to your Panto example because I really like it, of just a very traditional, Martin. I was going to invite you to explain this idea, because Martin was explaining to me on the phone, it's something you do at Southhill Park, isn't it? Yeah. And it's Panto, but then you've managed to extend that audience.
It was just
an idea. No, he hasn't. Sorry. Sorry.
That's brilliant.
It was just an idea of, as a producing venue, of saying, okay, what else can we do with our content, to use a sort of digital term, and we decided that we'd trial a test of setting up a network of health organisations who could become mini screening venues for this event. So we contacted children's hospices and hospital wards, and asked them if they'd like to receive a live stream of this pantomime. And there's a few challenges there in terms of technical abilities, but it's basically pretty simple to achieve. And what we found out is that they were really enthusiastic about it, and we now have a network of 35 screening partners for this event. And this is an audience who they're just plain not going to come to the venue because they're too sick, and we can actually give an awful lot of fun to them with what we're producing. But another interesting thing is how they staged this, rather than just sticking it on a laptop and saying, well, there it is. They actually made a kind of a mini event out of it in their own TV room of the hospital or something. Plugged a laptop into the big TV, had Christmas dinner with it as well, and actually made a sort of a local audience to watch that event. So that was a really sort of powerful experience to have, and we're trying to support that now and grow it with some other events.
I suppose where it would become interesting, though, is when the kids could actually interact as part of it, because I went to the Matisse Live at the cinema, and to me that was just a really great, culture show documentary. So the idea of it being streamed it added no extra value in that case, because it kept on. Well, only a small percentage of it was being live streamed, and then a lot of it was pre-recorded content. But the bit that was live was just dropping out all the time, and I couldn't see what extra value it had added.
But
I think when there's a conversation that starts with the audience, or there's some interaction, that's when it's
I think it's actually really important that if you're doing something of that nature, you actually acknowledge that the audience is there online. With that example of pantomime, there's a lot of freedom there for the pantomime dame to sort of name check the viewers in Cornwall or Derby or wherever their home is, and we actually sort of produce some material that only the online viewers see. So there's a little greeting from the panto dame to them as they log in, telling them that we want you to do it's behind you and interact with us. In their particular case, I think there's a bit of an issue about mobile phones in hospitals, so they tend not to sort of talk back that much. But But yeah, that conversation, if you can get it, is very important.
Yeah, a lot of the streaming services like Ustream, Justin.tv, have chat rooms attached to them, which is good as well. Sort of, if you've got somebody that, you know, it's just like, oh, who's this that's on now? Oh, it's so-and-so, they're from, here's the website. And you can have a little bit of a good chat in that way. So I think things like that are worth exploring.
That sort of stuff's been really exciting for a long time. I used to listen to a lot of online radio, and all the the sort of Rinse FM or Sub FM, all those types of things. They'll all have a chat room which is absolutely buzzing with people talking about the tunes that the DJ's playing, and suddenly it creates a kind of momentum around around the music and around that show because of the discussion you can have with with the audience, which you probably wouldn't have in a live space.
Yeah.
You wouldn't nudge the stranger next to you and go, I really like this bit, but you would online. So that I think there's some interesting possibilities there.
And this is something that came up in all of our chats before about this idea of the live event being a sort of balanced equation of things, really. Is that there's a ritual of going to the show, there's the audience, there's the audience's expectation, and there's the actual performance itself. And it seems with the, whether if you're streaming that and the audience aren't there, you affect one part of that equilibrium. And so there's going to be a result, and whether you can predict that result, but it's going to be very different. And just pretending that it's the same thing is deeply problematic. So, there are all sorts of examples we can think of where actually it might actually be better not to be there. The closing ceremony of the Olympics was one that I participated in on Twitter, and it was great. I was glad I wasn't there. It was wonderful on Twitter because everyone was being really sarcastic about it, and I really enjoyed it. And I was at home with a cup of tea and not having to stand up. So that was good. But there must be others as well. I mean, just we were talking about Metallica at Glastonbury, weren't we?
Yeah, it was like car crash telly, but you were having that. It was the equivalent of sitting with lots of people in a pub but without the rain, the mud, not having to camp. But there was this online conversation, so some people were really excited about the fact that here was a metal band playing Glastonbury, and then other people were thinking it was appalling, and so it was just this really interesting dialogue. But you were able to have that sort of pub conversation, I suppose, that sort of sociable element, but in the comfort of your own home.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really interesting point about the context of performance, and that, as producers and artists, we naturally focused on the work and the performance that's on stage. But Glyndebourne actually have got a really interesting way of framing things, what they call the Glyndebourne experience, which when the weather suits, you can take your picnic there and spend the afternoon there, and they acknowledge that as part of going to see opera there. They're interesting. I know I quoted them as an example earlier on, but if you look on their Twitter biog now, which they only have 160 characters to explain themselves on there, 3 words they use is streaming opera worldwide on there now. So they're that kind of committed to contacting a global audience through it. Mm-hmm. But they actually encourage people to have the Glyndebourne experience at home. So if you're watching one of their live streams, that they actually sort of will tweet photographs of the picnic hamper and the little cloth laid out and everything, because they see that what they're offering it's more than just what's on stage, which kind of challenges us all, I think, to.
I just wonder if it's worth mentioning the Cafe Otto project that we're both involved in, because that sort of picks up on that global audience thing. So Cafe Otto are developing a digital membership service based largely on the fact that a lot of their audiences and a lot of people on their mailing lists and on their Twitter lists, etc., are from overseas. And I think what's quite interesting about what they're trying to do is they're rethinking what it means to be a venue and thinking about themselves as an organisation with lots of followers or with a particular community, and they've got lots of relationships with musicians. So what they're looking to do through their digital memberships service is because they record every gig that they do, because a lot of them are one-off sort of collaborations, they record those and they're turning those into content that is downloadable. So for £10 or £15 or whatever it is going to be a month, you get access to 3 downloads a month. And the reason for them doing that is that they are totally looking to use that content to create an income stream for their live work. And I think there's something really interesting. And we were talking earlier, Martin and I, about it's great, you know, it is the Wild West, and there are lots of opportunities, but you've kind of got to know why you're doing whatever you're doing. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money just pursuing every single opportunity there is without really knowing why. And I think this, for venues, in particular, thinking about what they're trying to do. What do you mean by an online audience? Are your Twitter followers and your Facebook followers your online audience, or are you trying to build an online audience? You know, so I think there's lots in there that we've, you know, not sort of unpicked, but that might be something interesting to think about.
I think the dirty word of monetarisation needs to come into that equation as well, because we're kind of investigating lots of stuff at the moment. When we stream, it goes straight to Mixcloud afterwards, so you can pretty much like look at our archive, but we're not making any money from those performances because we're not playing in front of an audience. We're not charging any sort of subscription to listen. But, you know, we're starting to find that people are going, oh, could you come and stream our event for us? And, oh, could you do this? And, you know, I'm getting paid to speak here today, so it's great. You know, so there is other ways of doing it, but I think at some point it's the long conversation you always have with other artists. It's that whole, especially music and, like, punk rock I come from, it's like, oh, you sell out, you made some money, you should be stacking shelves to pay for your art. It's like absolute rubbish, that. That is so, you know, I've been a professional artist and musician for 15 years, freelance, and I've got to put food on my table and pay my bills. So, you know, yesterday's seminar, Robin Rimbaud, known as Scanner, said it's about, if you're a professional musician, it's getting up in the morning, working all day as if it's your job, and then doing it all again the next day. And so at some point you've got to think of monetarisation, as dirty a word as it sounds. And no, I think it's building up a trust with your audience. I think that's long term of, I buy a lot more CDs than I used to. I was downloading things from torrents for a while, but then I was like, actually, I've got to know Machine Fabric. Rutger's a really nice guy. I buy directly from him now because I know the money's going in his pocket, and Bandcamp's a really good example of that. So I think if you can build up a trust with the audience knows that they're actually giving you some money, whether it's a donations button or what, but they're actually, we like that, have some money to keep yourself going.
That comes back to quality and need, doesn't it? I mean, there has to be an audience in the first instance, or you have to be producing something that people want. There's no point in just putting it out there and then expecting it to make you money. You have to kind of build on that audience in the first instance.
Oh, totally. I think it comes back to, you know, you've got to be professional and have some sort of... We sort of move forward as a band fairly haphazardly. We don't really have a long-term plan. We just go, well, that's interesting, let's do that for a bit. Oh, we've got some money to look at streaming, and we're really excited about that, so we'll do that. And what it's about, you know, quality, and sort of, you know, if people want to come, want to start paying to see you, and we'll find new forms once we're out of the Wild West, and once the towns are settled, there will be some form there. So I think the big thing is that a lot of these big companies did stuff. MySpace, great example of, as soon as they tried to monetize things, it collapsed, and Facebook's starting to teeter a little bit like that. You know, people kind of expect at the moment to get a lot of content for free. We need to sort of start change that attitude, and you know, these people are creating art that people want to see.
But this idea of buying directly from the artist, I think, is really powerful, because like you, Shaun, I buy more music than I ever have, and I buy stuff directly from artists, and you know, again, it's another nice opportunity for conceptual continuity with yesterday, which something, a nice factoid, which I think I learned from one of Harry's tweets, actually, from yesterday, was something to do with Bandcamp as well, that, you know, more than 50% of people pay above the recommended, you know, asking price on Bandcamp, and actually, and isn't that a really positive thing, actually, if they think that, you've made this and it's actually going to you or a small independent label, you're much more likely to pay a little money, rather than just download a thing for nothing.
So it comes back to loyal audiences, essentially. So rather than going for the mass, it's about understanding who your audience are and having that sort of continued relationship with them.
Totally. Shall we ask them if they want to ask any questions?
They look keen.
They look keen. Oh, there's one there. It's roving mic time, because obviously the huge online audience can't hear you unless you're...
Hi there.
That's it. Hello.
Hi.
Who are you? Hello.
Hi. I'm Barney. I'm setting up a company at the moment that's all about creating sort of participatory and inclusive music opportunities for people. So I'm interested in Creative Commons licensing, and I wanted to sort of see what the panel thought about what they think of Creative Commons licensing. It's clearly good for sort of creativity, but I wonder how. I think a lot of people are sort of put off by it because they're worried about losing income when they sort of put their stuff out there for free. So I wanted to hear what you guys thought about that.
Could I answer that? Because my net label, Earth Monkey Productions, was all Creative Commons, and I think one of my albums had 150,000 downloads, and I didn't make a penny from it. So I kind of stopped doing Creative Commons stuff. Now all my stuff's on Bandcamp as pay what you want, so you can have it for nothing. But if you want to donate something to me, that's great. I'm still involved in the Creative Commons scene. It's a great scene. It's very much like the hacking scene, the open source scene, and like I say, it is brilliant creatively. And there's lots of great people out there, and like the Internet Archive, and sort of repositories like that are just fantastic. You can just get some amazing stuff. But at some point, the artist does need to eat. I think is the base for me. So it's finding if it's another. Maybe it is that the actual content becomes free, but there's another way that we make a living. Sort of. So that doesn't really answer the question, but that's sort of my experience of it. I've been there deeply, but then went actually no. I think I still like, but I usually try and donate to if people have got a donate button. If they download the album, give them a couple of quid.
I think there's, if I can just say, my understanding of Creative Commons is that it's a way of you attributing your ownership of the work and actually making it publicly known how you would like the audience to treat that. It doesn't necessarily preclude you from selling that. It's a way that you don't need to work or go through a sort of traditional publisher, but you're stating your own ownership and the rights you're willing to give your audience.
Yeah, there's a few levels of it where you can completely give it to the public domain, which I do a lot of remix and art projects that I do. It's a great way of getting stuff out there, and people can have the files, and then there's no derivatives. So people can't do anything with it but listen to it. There's make derivatives but name it. I think there's about four levels of different. Yeah.
I think it goes back to knowing why you're doing it, doesn't it? So if you're
yeah.
releasing something because you want to get out there, or if it's a remix or something like that. So it's just about trying to be a bit more strategic about what you're doing, I think.
I remember when we first started, we had a business advisor, and he was sort of looking on paper in terms, you're not making anything from the gigs that you're putting on. But actually, we sort of reframed it as that was our R&D, that was our sort of building audiences. And so if you can think about, if you're really clear about what the purpose is, it then led to the bigger projects that we did. And so it was kind of part of our sort of strategy. So I guess if you're giving a taster, of work to sort of encourage more work, paid work, then that's another way of looking at it.
Can I just ask you if you're setting up a company, are you expected to make money?
Yes, well, it's going to be a non-profit organisation.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working out at the moment, and I'm really trying to, I guess, try and create these more opportunities for people to get involved in music making where you don't need money in the first place. Like I really found that sort of fascinating how you sort of created your sort of streaming setup down from £7,000 to 15 quid. It's stuff like that. It's bringing down the price. I know that's a different topic. That's to do with technology. Yeah. But yes, I need to make a living somehow. I need to be able to run the company and not have to do another job.
So yeah, I guess there's two things. There's the IP, isn't there? But there's also however you organise the IP doesn't prevent you from selling it, as you know, Shaun's example sort of states, because you could still make a Creative Commons license where people could actually use that material, but then if you were selling it yourself, then then you're monetising it. Is that a reasonably accurate paraphrase of your?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, just one last thing. My own thought about it was that when I speak to people, I try to convince them, you know, it's good to sort of share your music more, because I think that the more you share your music, the more chance it's going to be out there more, you're going to get more followers, and you might not necessarily sell your music, but get more live gigs, like you say, but also possible opportunities syncing your music to TV and advertising and other stuff like that. So I think it's always a good thing, but I guess you don't necessarily.
I think you need to know who you're sharing it with, though, because to say that it's just out there, it's like if you walked into a library, you would go to a specific department. You wouldn't just sort of stand in the library. You might go to the science section and then look at a very specific shelf to find the book that you want. So I think it's, while you're putting it out there for free, you're still trying to engage with a particular audience and to kind of build from that. And I think you need to be quite clear in your mind who are they, rather than just the notion of it, okay, it's on the web, anyone can have it. There's such a saturation of stuff.
That is the argument a lot of blog rolls and torrents use as well, that you should be thankful that we've ripped your album and put it up there for nothing, because you're getting it out to more people. But, you know, 150,000 albums with not a single penny. Sort of, when I put them on Bandcamp, I sold one for £3. So, you know.
But that sort of ties into that whole notion of online curation, doesn't it? And discovery services and all those sorts of things. So, you know, which we've not talked about. But, you know, again, that's another thing that venues are, you know, you talked about tastemakers, Lisa, in terms of your audience, but you're also a tastemaker as a festival, aren't you? So I think there are all sorts of ways that artists, through, you know, recommendations that you might have for other artists or venues or festivals, whatever, in a sense, you're also tastemakers. And I think that's what's so interesting about Cafe Otter, is the way that they're not defining themselves as just by what's happening on stage, but they're thinking about the relationship with artists that they've got and the family of artists that have performed there.
Yeah, I think that's our responsibility as festival curators, is that we're choosing some work, and then we're finding an audience for it, you know. And so there's thousands and thousands of bands, aren't there? You know, and it's about making a relationship with those artists, and then thinking about who would engage with that work.
Yeah, and that was always my job when I was a marketing manager. You know, that's what you're there to do. You're there to kind of, you know, be a tastemaker and curate and direct. And
there's nothing more upsetting than putting on an event that no one's there for. So you have to. I think all too often people think about the product and not think about who it's for. But if you don't think about who it's for, you know, might as well not get out of bed.
Here we all are, out of bed. Does anyone have any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, gentleman just down here. Thank you.
I'm not sure if I need any introduction. I'm extremely new to this, and there are two areas of interest. Although, and the longer as the individuals have spoken, and the more they answered, as for most of it. Although there are two areas here of interest, at least to me. And the first is, if this is a work of imagination largely, and you can walk your own road, is there any individual experiences in which you say, I will not go there again? And the other thing, in the way of an interest, last month, and we had numerous exhibitions of student work in the way of the graduation shows. And I'd like to know if there's anything happening there in the art schools which is really an indication as to where we are going in the field.
Okay, so two things there. Who wants to share their cautionary tales, first of all? Well, Shaun already has bared his soul about all the money that he didn't make.
I think one of the things, one of the streaming, we try to do a streaming gig using Off the Peg, sort of to do an AV show, and it was planned to be a gig from London, us playing in Cumbria and Atlanta, Georgia. And I think we overcooked the egg somewhat, I think. And the signal dropped just before we went live from London, so I ended up playing a little solo set while Phil furiously tried to replug and ended up downloading from Skype. Then, just before we played, we somehow, YouTube have a copyright notice thing that shuts you off if you breach any sort of copyright. And as it was all live improvised music, I'm not quite sure how that happened. But nobody saw our set because then we noticed after we'd played that we'd been turned off and we got it going. We really enjoyed watching Duet for Theremin Lapsteel from Atlanta. But what we realised afterwards was the audio signal wasn't going out to the audience. It was just the visuals. So there's only like 3 people in the world that saw that gig and they didn't bother recording it. It's the only show that hasn't been recorded by those guys. So I think going too far is a place I won't. You know, be sure of, keep it simple, and be sure of what you're doing. Is the sort of being overcomplicated isn't a place I want to go to again because it's quite embarrassing, sort of. Because I thought somebody might have tweeted us because people were like, "Yeah, well, I was wondering what was going on." Sort of, because it was just visuals and like, yeah, if you tweeted, we could have gone, oh right.
I think there's some interesting learning about how audiences behave online, and from the performance projects that I've done, you can guarantee that an online audience will always show up late. So if you're starting an event at 8 o'clock, it might take half an hour for your sort of viewership to build up to the stable audience. So if you've got something really critical that you want people to see right at the beginning, the online audience may not see that. So if there's some introduction that for information they need to know,
like introduction to panelists.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Note to self.
But people will consume things very differently. So they might listen for 10 minutes and then go off. But they'll expect a watch again function for a streamed event. So they'll actually, think that by the nature of it, it's flexible and they can come back to it tomorrow or whenever suits them, rather than sticking to the traditional live notion that it starts and ends at a fixed time.
Yeah, just a few little stats from yesterday's seminar was peak audience of 7, 51 people watched it. While it was happening, with just under 9 minutes was the average time they spent online over the hour and a quarter, which is actually 9 minutes is actually quite good sort of for such a thing.
Yeah, it's longer than people look at a picture over the road, isn't it, down there?
Yeah, sort of. So again, I think it's don't expect too much from your online audience until you build up that relationship with them. I think.
Well, there's a fantastic opportunities to learn because you can look at those statistics and see what your particular audience do, and so I think trying things don't perhaps as another advice don't invest a huge amount of time and effort into the very first thing you do because you'll learn an awful lot from it, which will then let you do something better next time.
I think this links to what Martin just said. I think my big learning over the last few years has just been around how much time it takes to make all of this happen. We a project that we run called Phrased and Confused, we used to do a daily podcast from a festival, which is a great way of kind of building a bigger awareness of what you're doing at that festival. But actually, it took a long time to put it together, and we were doing it kind of really rough and ready. But it still meant that after a day of running a festival tent, Matt was there, kind of pulling together content, and it just takes a lot of time to make good content, I think. And if that's what you're trying to do, then you just need to build that in. It may not cost you money in terms of expensive kit. You clearly can do it cheaply, but it does take a lot of time. So that would be my one thing. The other thing, just backing up what Martin said, is I'm trying throughout this whole project to be curious about things rather than scared of them. And I think given that we are in the kind of Wild West, that's been the theme of the morning, I think the more that you can kind of think about curiosity and fear being the same, different sides of the same coin, then that might help you kind of keep going.
I think online audiences are less inhibited as well, so they're much more opinionated, and they feel that they're slightly more anonymous, so they can kind of make these blanket statements without kind of having any context, and so you've kind of got to take that stuff with a pinch of salt, really. That would be my experience.
I'm not a panellist, I'm the chair, but with the panel's permission, I think I've thought of a reasonable answer to the second part of your question, which was around emerging practice, and what are the new ideas and things that are coming out of art schools and things like that. Well, at Sound and Music, we're involved a lot with emerging practice, and emerging practice sort of comes through the door all the time. So people are sending us the ideas of things that they're actually doing, and I think it's very difficult in this area of work to separate the live and the digital in a way, really, to separate the core practice of the artist-to-artist collective from the digital work that they're doing. And to give you a more practical example, I've noticed in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, actually a bit longer, since the sort of funding bubble kind of burst, actually, that the sort of DIY strategies that were used in industrial music or free improvisation, now they've proliferated to what were the more traditionally funded areas of music, such as, contemporary classical music, modern composition, areas where kind of people, there was still a lingering culture of you could sit around waiting for someone to commission you. The generation of people that are coming through now, they were never in that bubble, so they're very much DIY in the same way that a punk group would be, almost. Like they form their own groups, they organise their own audiences, they organise their own events, and in terms of actually them creating their events, they're creating digital content as well. So they're actually documenting these events really, really well, with that as a mind to what you were saying earlier, of using that as leverage and legacy for going on. And they inhabit social media naturally because they're natives to it, rather than myself or maybe yourself as well, who were kind of around before all this stuff kind of exploded. So to separate the two things out is kind of difficult, really, because it's just a natural part of what they're trying to do. And also they're really keen to learn, and they see something and they just, oh no, I'll use that myself. So they're borrowing approaches, and very, very connected as well. And through social media as well, and through digital technology, those little collectives and ensembles and groups are connected to people all over the UK, and they're all sort of swapping artists and organising programmes and things like that. So it's just that, going back to the idea of amplification again, things are just a lot faster. People can make connections, get set up, and learn the lessons from everybody else a lot quicker. So I think in ways of working and just getting your limited resources to go further, there's a lot of innovation around that. And I think actually organisations can probably learn quite a lot from artists in the way that the artists are actually working at that level at the moment.
Now maybe there's one more.
Great.
If you look at architecture,
Okay.
you have an outstanding example in the way of like Zaha Hadid. If you look at her drawings, if you say 15 years ago, they couldn't build it. And the technology was lagging behind in the way of the computer modeling, etc. And in your particular areas of interest, is there an area which you, as we regard as in need of, if not a remedy or an upgrade, which will have a dramatic impact in the way you work or the way you create?
Well, I've got an example of one that came along. So me and Phil started Hugs Bison purely. I was putting events on, like free improv and experimental events in Cumbria, and Phil sort of started DJing at them, and he had an iPad. And so we started, I used an iPhone live, and we just started talking about, what could we do with it? So we started having little rehearsals just to look at the technology, and we found that we'd go, oh, this is great, then go, I want to do that. And the big thing was, wouldn't it be great if we've got this keyboard app, and I want to put it through this delay app and through some reverb. Wouldn't it be great if there was an app for that? Then a month later, there's an app called Audiobus came out, which was exactly that. And we find that we push against the technology quite a lot, and then something comes out. Because a lot of the developers with sort of iPads especially are listening we're talking to them. You know, we use ThumbJam a lot, which is a really great app, but we've been talking to the guy that developed that about doing some instruments for him. Or you go, oh, wouldn't it be great if your app did that? And there's this constant feedback sort of between developers, the technologists, and the artists. So, but that just that one little example was that just opened up what we were doing immensely, because suddenly you could have 2 or 3 things on the go at once. So we just like, it felt like a toy to start with maybe, but now it's like a real instrument, the iPad, because people are getting everything to fit together now.
I'm kind of aware that we were supposed to have finished 10 minutes ago, and that everyone probably hasn't had a coffee for ages. So, is it okay if we end now? But I welcome you very much to approach us individually or collectively to continue the conversation offline. Sorry, online audience. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to. Can you have a round of applause for the panelists who've been such interesting insight? Thank you very much for getting out of bed on Sunday morning and actually coming in. I really appreciate it. I was a bit worried there's going to be no one here. So as people started drifting in, that made me feel fantastic. And I'm very pleased about that. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. I hope you're going to some of the concerts.
Yeah, if you want to revisit, Phil will be starting to sort of sort it out. It should be, by the time you get home, you can watch it again.